Greetings and welcome. Thank you for coming. Before we begin, let me take a few moments to give the obligatory like this video, comment on this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and more importantly, share this video with a friend, a coworker, or that fat guy in the third row. Let's try and get us to 1,000 subscribers before Christmas. And seriously, if you got the fat guy reference, you, like me, spent way too much time in acting class in high school. While you're at it, be sure to check out my Patreon channel. Consider becoming a subscriber and help keep my editor energized with ramen and sake. Seriously, he's a large part of what makes this channel work. And lastly, a quick shout out to my Tier 4 patrons, Russ of the Frozen North, Neu5AC, Nick, Zachary Langmead, and Scared Wolf 1206. Thank you very much. Now, on with the story. The Deathworlders, a story by Philip R. Johnson, a.k.a. Hambone, Hambone HFY, and Hambone 3110. Chapter 24, An Alien World. Part 3. Date point, 10 years, 4 months AV. Clan White Press Personal Transport Springing Ember. Cimbrean System, The Far Reaches. Regarii. Sensing and communicating with ships that were traveling at superluminal speeds had been a serious challenge and concern before the Cortai had figured out the algorithms for detecting and modulating the wake every ship created as it stretched and contracted spacetime around itself. The expansion and contraction of spacetime being unbound by the speed of light, the system made for an efficient and cheap means of FTL communication, with only the slight drawback that it had an effective range of no more than about a day's travel at 1 kilolight. Not even enough for communication between two relatively close star systems, and no inhabited systems were that close together anyways. Still, it was good enough for ships in the same system to see and talk to one another. In the past, once a ship had departed, it would outrun any photons sent after it, and so talking to it was simply impossible unless you got in a faster ship, overtook it, and dropped a transmission in its path. Nowadays, unidentified vessel, this is HMS Violent patrolling Cimbrean local space. Cease your approach and identify. Over. Regarii ordered the ship down to sublight at once. Violent, Gowan transport Springing Ember, piloted by Officer Regarii of Clan Whitecrest, on diplomatic mission, ceasing approach. As he did so, Ayma poked her head out of the ship's ablutions chamber, combing her fur to clean out her dust path. "We've arrived?" she asked. "We were just intercepted by one of the human ships, the Violent." Ayma's ears quirked and she grimaced. "Violent?" she asked. "Just Violent? What an ugly name for a ship." "Unsubtle, isn't it?" Regarii agreed, though privately he felt that the name was appropriately bellicose for a warship. Why mask its nature behind poetic imagery? A minute later, Violent hit sublight at a relative stop a few hundred kilometers away. His transport only registered its presence by the friendly identity signals it was broadcasting. Without those, it would have been all but invisible. No radar signature, with a shape and albedo that sent every sensor they had skipping off without a trace and zero visible heat. Regarii knew that it would only be radiating all of its heat in a coherent beam back towards the nearest star. Only his experimental gravimetric sensors, designed to counter hunter cloaking devices, told him that something was there, and they were still far too imprecise to narrow down the exact location of Violent's mass to within a radius of better than 30 kilometers. "Springing Ember, please disable all electronic security and submit to a database scan." "They really are paranoid," Ayma commented. "I heard a saying of theirs once. It's not paranoia if they really are out to get you," Ayma finished. "Yes, but they can plainly see that we are not hunters, can't they?" "Well, like you said, they are paranoid," Regarii snorted, dropping the firewalls. He watched the alerts unfold as Violence technicians first infiltrated, then thoroughly ransacked the Springing Emperor's computer. Fortunately, the ship wasn't carrying any clan secrets. He'd made completely sure of that before leaving. 2 more contacts appeared on his sensors as the intrusion was withdrawn, and he was sent an all-clear to re-establish the firewall. Those were small compared to his transport in the human destroyer, but large relative to most starfighters. Firebirds. "Springing Ember, proceed to orbit above the 5th planet of this system and await further instructions." Cimbrean 5 was the outermost of the system's rocky worlds and the only one outside the system's protection field. It was classified as a violent world, a planet far too cold for sapient habitations, where it rained liquid methane into oceans of liquid methane under hateful skies full of methane clouds, where pressure differentials in its thick cryogenic atmosphere could pick up razor shards of rock-hard water ice and carry them around the globe at hundreds of miles an hour. Under the watchful eye of HMS Violent and the two escorts, they sat restlessly and watched the lightning flashes in the planet's upper atmosphere for nearly an hour before a fourth contact set alarms wailing on their proximity sensors as it appeared with only 20 kilometers or so, and well outside of Violent's firing solution. HMS Caledonia. He recognized it instantly. No sooner than it jumped in, he spotted the change in its sensor signature as it opened its bay door. Regari clipped on an earpiece and headed for the starboard airlock. Ayma cast around for something to do, clean up or tidy, and finding nothing, settled for lowering herself onto a couch and fidgeting nervously at her claws. The springing ember's sensors picked up the barest hint of a tiny warp drive pulsing, and Regari inclined his head to listen as a new voice came on the communicator. "Springing Ember, boarding party from HMS Caledonia request permission to come aboard." "Permission granted. Starboard airlock," he told them. "Is that you, Rebar?" "Sure is, Dexter. They got us doing some marine shit. Starboard airlock." There were 3 total, Rebar, Blazinski, and Baseball, who squeezed into the lock, then through into the ship interior. Only when the lock was fully cycled did they demask, all grinning and happy to see him. If he wasn't totally familiar with human body language by now, it would have been terrorizing to see that many bared teeth. For her part, Ayma retreated a little, and Regari couldn't blame her. The 3 men smelled powerfully male, almost overwhelmingly so. "Not that I am not happy to see you," Regari began, greeting the 3 of them with his best approximation of the elaborate and forceful handshake they'd taught him. "But I'm quite capable of docking and landing this ship by myself." "Security's been tightening up," Blazinski commented. "Hopefully we'll be able to brief you on why sometime, but right now rules say I have to fly this thing in for you." Regari stood aside and gestured to the control room. In keeping with Gowan architecture, it was at the back of the ship, immediately in front of the main engines. There was, after all, no good logical reason for the pilot to sit at the front of the ship, when he would be flying by sensor readings and information displays anyways. Meanwhile, the sleeping quarters could be mounted in the front of the ship as far from the power core and main kinetic thrusters as possible, and therefore quieter and calmer. "And for that you need 3, he asked.
"No such thing as too careful, bro," Baseball told him. "This a friend of yours?"
"Ah, yes." Base touched his forehead, which Regari guessed was a respectful gesture.
"Pardon me, ma'am, but I need to scan you for hazards and contraband," he declared.
Ayma shot a questioning look back at Regari, who ducked his head to reassure her. This was just a standard human caution. She spread her arms and straightened up. "Go ahead."
"Thank you, ma'am."
Base flipped a small gray oblong out of a pouch on his belt and delicately pressed it to Ayma's head. Regari couldn't imagine why, but moments later the screen on the back lit, and Baseball relaxed.
"Sorry about that."
"It was no bother," Ayma reassured him politely. "So, yes," Regari stepped forward. "Baseball, Rebar, Starfall, this is Ayma."
"Oh, so that's what this is about. Your friend Zhu."
Baseball snapped his fingers, the effect muffled slightly by his spacesuit's glove. "Xiu," Ayma corrected him. "Xiu," Rebar corrected them both. "Like you hadn't guessed," Regari noted. The humans chuckled again, and Rebar looked around at the springing ember's interior.
"Nice ship."
"Whitecrest Personal Transport, one of the newest models. Designed to deliver an individual or small group on relatively short journeys, very quickly."
"Surely the faster it is, the further it goes."
"We borrowed some ideas from you," Regari told him. "Using capacitors to power the engines gives much better speed but limits the range. That was deemed an acceptable trade, seeing as it's intended for rapid travel within our territory, between Gao, Gorai, and the new colonies on Gwenha. Cimbrean, fortunately, is not that far from Gorai." "So this thing runs on solar power?" Blazinski asked, settling onto the pilot's couch. Usually it recharges off its own generator. We wanted to install a quantum power core, but our versions of those are bulky and not very efficient yet, so we went with old-fashioned fusion. It can recharge via its shields if it has to, though, yes. Blazinski nodded and checked in with Caledonia, Violent, and the two Firebirds to confirm that the ship now had a human pilot and that all life forms on board were accounted for. Eta 2, go for slave jump whenever you're ready. Slave jump? The cryogenic gray storms of Cimbrean 5 vanished. In an eye blink, the planet Cimbrean, the inhabited one, all blues and greens and whites, replaced it below them and much larger. Oh, impressive. Nice and secure. Only way in is directly under our guns and with our permission. Blazinski waved a hand through the ship's controls, a little tentatively, but clearly knowing what he intended to do and more or less how to achieve it. He was hindered a little bit by not being able to read Gowan, but the interface was designed to be clear and intuitive. Selecting the Folkta colony's landing beacon and ordering the Springing Ember to land that beacon took him only a minimum of trial and error.
So yeah, Zoo.
Xiu.
Xiu.
In my defense, my mouth is the wrong shape to pronounce that, Regarii pointed out. I don't know what baseball's excuse is.
She was in a bad way, bro, Baseball told him, aiming a friendly, obscene gesticulation by way of reply. I don't know what the fuck happened to them exactly, but when we pulled them out of that live wrap, they were dying from recent vacuum exposure. Ayma keened slightly, and Regarii barely restrained the impulse himself. The thought was distressing. Hey, it's fine, Baseball hurried to reassure them. Horse ain't just a pretty face, he's a damn good medic, too. She's back on Earth now. Last I heard, she's doing just fine. Major Powell should know more, Blazinski added. He was watching the Springing Ember's instruments for any sign of trouble, even though the ship was completely competent of landing itself. Already their re-entry was raging a burnt orange around the edge of the force field. Good, because it's him that we're here to see, Regarii told him. Pleasant as it is to see you again, this is important, both personally and politically. Dude, we're on the job too, Rebar assured him. But you're cool to hang out once your business is done. Movie night?
That would be nice.
Politically? Blazinski asked.
It's all...
Ayma interrupted him.
Xiu is a female.
The humans blinked at one another, nonplussed. Well, yeah, Baseball agreed in a tone which suggested that this fact could not possibly have been lost on them.
I mean a female, Ayma stressed patiently. A member of the clan of females. Legally speaking, she is a Gowan.
To hell with legally speaking, Rebar scoffed.
Legally speaking, less than 10 years ago, we were non-sapient indigenous fauna. Don't be so quick to dismiss legal technicalities, Regarii warned him. By making her legally a Gowan, the females made her legally sapient, and that afforded her all kinds of rights and protections guaranteed by the Dominion Charter. One technicality used to defeat another, you see? Forgive us if we're not exactly going to start cheerleading for the Dominion there, Southpaw, Rebar commented. If you ever see me waving those pom-poms myself, then clearly I'll have taken leave of my senses. And as my friends, I hope you would shoot me, Regarii retorted, doing his best to imitate a grin. It seemed to work as the humans chuckled, and Ayma chittered along with them. Atmospheric flight, Blazinski interjected. But he makes a valid point, Ayma told them. Irritating as legal technicalities might be, they're never going to go away. Rather than railing against them and achieving nothing, it's better to pick them up and use them as weapons. Sticks in the craw, but she's right, Rebar mused, then frowned at something forward of the ship and edged on through the doorway past Baseball to investigate. What's this thing? Oh, that's the ship's nanofactory, Regarii told him. What's it do? Builds things. You can call up a blueprint, and it assembles the desired object from raw materials. Like a 3D printer? Blazinski asked. In the same way that this ship's short-range FTL comms are like a telephone, yes, Regarii agreed. This is a small one. Clothing, basic tools, replacement part for the ship, Larger ones can assemble vehicles, prefabricated modules that can be assembled into cheap buildings, even other nanofactories.
Brother, Baseball warned Rebar in a friendly tone, you know your techs won't like it if you go and cream your suit. Rebar laughed, but continued to study the nanofactory with a rapt expression. So, it can build anything.
Anything synthetic, Regarii agreed. No cooked dinners, pharmaceuticals, complex organic molecules, or anything made out of, say, wood or bone, but plastics, metals, glass. All you have to do is feed in the materials.
Could it build something that could make those things? Rebar asked.
Regarii hesitated. You know, I've never thought of that. I suppose it probably could.
Dude, we've got to get one of these things. Rebar aimed a look at him that Regarii guessed meant that he wanted to ask if they might scavenge the one off this ship. He chittered.
Sadly, I cannot do that, my friend, he apologized. Not only would I be breaking a rather important law, but the fathers who own this ship would be upset, and in any case, it's an integral part of the Springing Ember's fittings.
It's not a module you can pull out and replace it if it breaks? Rebar frowned at it again.
Oh, I could, Regarii said. It would just ruin the facade. This is a diplomatic vessel, Rebar. Our military vessels are much more... what's that word? Spartan. Besides, as I said, sharing nanofactory technology with a species that does not yet have it is gravely illegal. This device could cause a traumatic economic upheaval for your whole species and delay your advancement. I assume you don't want that.
Right. It seemed that Rebar would like to have argued for a second, but instead he stood up, sighed longingly at the nanofactory. Then a thought struck him. Dude, do you mind if I make something?
Regarii quirked his head, a gesture analogous to a human shrug. I don't mind, he said. Ship, make a diagnostic sensor. The ship chimed acknowledgement, and Rebar took a step back as the forge built up to operational power with an edge of hearing keen of capacitors charging before... thump! Modern Gowan nanofactories, and this was one of the latest and most advanced models, could do in a few seconds what their primitive forebearers had needed minutes to do. Admittedly, the built-in accelerated time fields helped there, but the result was that within 5 seconds of his issuing the order, the transparent door folded down, and a pristine new engineering scanner was pushed into the delivery tray. Baseball grunted a surprised laugh.
Shit!
Damn, Dexter! Rebar picked up the scanner delicately, as if he feared it might be hot, or would disintegrate at his mere touch. Give it a try, Regarii told him. Rebar eagerly examined the little device, figured out how to turn it on, and aimed it at a nearby wall. Volumetric displays began to give him a detailed breakdown of the wall's composition, internal structure, the conduits and systems running behind it, and the microscopic work fractures in the metal hull behind it, and the action of the ship's internal damage control force field constantly sweeping over and repairing that wear and tear. His jaw dropped, and he set about waving his new toy at every system and fitting that he could find.
Final approach, Blazinski announced some minutes later as Rebar was making enthusiastic noises about the infrahull integrated crystal circuitry. His pants still dry, Base?
50-50, Baseball grinned. Regarii quirked his ears amusedly as the three of them settled into a round of friendly insults and ambled over to where Ayma was standing alone by one of the floor-to-ceiling windows that ringed Springing Ember's lounge area. She'd retreated there probably as much to get away from the masculine aroma pervading the air around the SOR man as to try and compose her thoughts, he guessed. They're very male, she whispered. Xiu was very female, Regarii countered. Similar pheromones. It's a good thing I've seen human movies, though. That large one. Baseball? The man in question glanced in their direction on hearing his name, then politely looked away again. Yes? Regarii asked. If I didn't already know about ethnicity, his skin color would have come as a surprise. Be careful, Regarii cautioned. Humans can be quite offended by observations like that. Oh, he can't hear us, can he?
Ayma asked, glancing at him. You two talking about me? Base asked, because I don't speak Gowan. Sorry, Regarii told him. Nada, just wondered.
You're very large, Ayma suggested. It's a little intimidating.
Not much I can do about that, Base shrugged. But if it helps you feel better, I'm a medic.
A medic? I hadn't anticipated that.
Ayma examined him.
Why does a medic need to be so large?
I'm what we call a protector, Baseball said, going down to one knee to try and mitigate his bulk. It didn't work. My job is to get people out of harm's way and keep them there. Doesn't matter if I have to skydive from orbit to do it. I go in there, I fix people up who need fixing, and I carry them out. Just like my buddy Horse did for your boy here. Ayma glanced at Regarii, who nodded.
Warhorse is shorter, he said, but more...
He made an inflating motion with his paws and shrugged his own shoulders to hint at a muscularity that no Gowan, not even the supremely physical clan Stoneback, could ever approach. That's my boy, Baseball beamed.
Ladies and gentlefolk, we're now coming in low over downtown Folktha. If you look out the port windows, you get a nice view of the river. Local time is 11:20 and the weather is a gentle 65 degrees, Blazinski called. Thank you for flying Air SOR, and please take care when opening your overhead lockers, as bags and luggage may have shifted during the flight.
Regarii hadn't landed on Cimbrean last time. Caledonia had warped directly to Gao to drop off his cargo of survivors from Capital Station, on the grounds that the Gowans were diplomatically better equipped to send them home. He was curious to see what a human settlement looked like from the air. Folktha wasn't large, but it did manage to impress him. The layout was equal parts logical and illogical. Clearly at first they had built accordingly to where the colonists wanted to go, and when the time came to expand, they had allowed that early random development to remain and grown out from there sensibly and methodically. The humans obviously loved the river, which flowed from a reservoir fed by artesian aquifers on the grounds of the alien palace that had once stood at the top of the valley. The buildings along its banks were separated from the waters by a wide green strip of parkland and trees, and the river itself was strung with 3 slender footbridges and a pair of wide, sturdy road bridges. The advertisements were colorful and pleasant. The construction sites were neatly organized and full of interesting yellows and blues, and the roads, though wide and capacious, were for now populated more by cyclists and pedestrians rather than large vehicles. The springing ember circled in low over a walled and force-fielded enclave that could only be the alien quarter, banked to race up the west bank of the river where relaxed pedestrians shielded their eyes to look up and watch it, shed its speed over the palace grounds and finally alighted delicately on a concrete circle on the grounds of a fenced base some distance from the town.
Good landing, he complimented Blazinski.
It was all right. The SR man's cocky smile said he knew it had been damn near flawless, but didn't want to make a big deal of it. Man, I never thought I'd get to see one of those things up close, Regarii chuckled, casting a longing glance at the nanofactory.
Don't you have one?
Think they're building an experimental one in Germany. It's the size of Caledonia, and they reckon it'll drink about 200 megawatts.
Regarii reflected on that. Sometimes I forget that you're still a long way behind us technologically.
Dude, it's only been like 10 years since first contact, Regarii said. We've had warp for what, 8 years? 7.5? Yeah, and our CO's banging the chick who flew Pandora. Baseball grinned as they stepped through the airlock.
Now that's an interesting fucking thing to hear.
As ever, it was difficult to hear the humor in Powell's bassy voice. You had to know that gruff and softly spoken was a ground state of being to spot that he wasn't remotely annoyed. All 3 of his men froze.
Wherever did you hear a rumor like that, Burgess?
Baseball cleared his throat. Rumor, sir?
My mistake. I must have misheard what you were saying, Powell nodded. Incidentally, the sand in the grav ball chamber needs raking flat. I've always fancied it might be fun to turn that into some kind of Zen garden thing. Think I saw some suitable large rocks over by the gym. Sound like fun?
Burgess didn't do anything so obvious as deflate, but there was a definite resigned hint to his, yes, sir.
Get out of that suit and go play, lad. I'm sure our guest's business is urgent, and I mustn't keep them waiting. I'll be along to see how you're getting on in a bit.
Yes, sir. Burgess vanished, double time. Powell turned to Rebar.
Ought to report.
Nice ship, clean, pilot's yellow, but his friend's beautifully green.
Regari blinked in confusion.
We're... what?
Sorry, in-joke. I'll explain later, Rebar promised.
Don't bother, Regari sighed. I could study human in-jokes for a decade, and by the time I've finished, you'd have generated 20 years more.
The humans chuckled.
Shall we go de-suit, Major?
Go on, lads. Well done. Regari, and I assume this is Mother Ayma?
Ayma extended a paw, which the Major shook. He seemed to have got the hang of exactly how much of his prodigious strength he could safely use, and there was no hesitation in the gesture.
Stainless, I presume.
Major Owen Powell.
Thank you for having us.
They ambled away from the springing ember.
Nice ship, Powell commented.
It's not mine personally, Regari told him. It's the clan's. I persuaded Father Rithu that this trip would be politically advantageous.
Hope you didn't lie to the old man, Dexter.
Not deliberately, Regari shrugged for Powell's benefit. I would appreciate it if you didn't make me a liar, though.
I reckon I might be able to accommodate you there, the Major mused. Or rather, Admiral Knight can. Political is a bit above my pay grade.
If I'm any judge, you know something that the Admiral has planned.
Oh, aye.
You're as opaque as a window, Powell.
That's so.
But commendably stubborn, Regari conceded.
You're not exactly Mr. Subtle yourself, Southpaw, Powell chuckled. We pick your friend up and you show up as fast as legally possible. If you even fooled Father What's-His-Face, I'll be impressed.
Regari had to admit he had a point.
How is she?
Ayma asked. Powell stopped walking and turned to face her, thumbs tucked into his belt.
Something of a local celebrity in Vancouver, he revealed. Medically, all I've got for you is what Burgess and Aries told me during the debrief.
Which is?
Ayma pressed.
Miss Chang was recovered in the company of 2 other humans, all suffering from severe decompression injuries. Apparently, they were exposed to hard vacuum for a few seconds.
Regari chirped his astonishment.
And they survived,
he asked, scarcely believing it. Vacuum was death. Everyone knew that. He wouldn't have thought that even Deathworlders could have survived it.
Barely, Powell grunted. All 3 of them were dying from the injuries. Luckily for them, they got picked up by 2 very fine young medics aboard a flying hospital with stasis equipment on board.
And?
Ayma squeaked. She was doing her best to stay composed, but Regari knew her intimately, and he could spot she was in anguish.
And they've all since been discharged and are rebuilding their lives, Powell said,
nodding reassuringly. Both Ayma and Regari sighed in relief.
She got prompt and expert medical attention. She's young and healthy. Burgess reckons she should suffer no long-term ill health, and he'd know.
Where was she before that?
Good question,
Powell answered, which didn't answer the question at all.
You must have got the ship's ID off the life raft. What ship was she on?
Ayma pressed.
I can't say.
Regari studied him. Humans were aliens. Their body language was only tangentially similar to that of Gowan's, and he was still having trouble with some of their subtleties of tone and language, but he learned to trust his instincts with them. Besides, Powell was a plain-spoken man, and Regari's assessment was that he rarely said anything that wasn't exactly what he meant.
Do you mean that you don't know, or that you do and you can't tell me?
He asked, and caught the momentary tick in Powell's eye that suggested he'd scored a hit.
I can't say.
Ah, so it's the latter.
Transparent I fucking might be, but penetrable I'm not, mate.
You can say much by withholding comment, Regari pointed out. There's a secret here. For her to have turned up in the company of humans meant she was on a human starship, or at least on a starship allied to humans,
By God, Holmes, you've cracked the case, Powell snarked.
Regari ignored the wisecrack.
Life raft and vacuum exposure means that the ship was destroyed, which means...
Ayma finished the thought for him.
She found Kirk, she said. Or Kirk found her.
Powell didn't need to say a thing. He simply spun and directed an incredulous stare at Ayma, then at Regarii. When Regarii folded his arms and pricked his ears up, it dawned on Powell that he couldn't have spoken a clearer confirmation, and he swore violently and furiously with himself. Shit! He gritted his teeth thoughtfully at nothing for a second, then exhaled resignedly.
Okay, I need to know exactly how much you two know about Kirk.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been The Deathworlders, Chapter 24, Part 3. If you enjoyed this content, please smash those like and subscribe buttons and consider dropping us a comment to help feed the hungry algorithm. As always, a huge shout out to my editor, Graygor. Thank you very much, buddy. You helped make this thing possible. Okay, and for the question of the day, hardline phones. Who here still has one? Who remembers using them back in the 80s and 90s? And do you think they might be worth maybe bringing back? Leave your answers in the comments down below. Until next time, be safe, be well. I love you all. Bye-bye.